Loneliness is not just an emotion, it is a weight, a crushing, invisible burden that presses down with a force few can understand unless they've carried it. It is not the simple absence of people, but the absence of connection. The kind of connection that says, I see you, I choose you, you matter to me. A woman with no friends wakes up every morning to a world that speaks in noise but offers no voice to answer her soul. And every day, she steps out into that world knowing she will move through it like a ghost, noticed perhaps, but never known. She walks into rooms filled with people, laughter, casual conversations, and fleeting smiles. And yet, she remains untouched. She may sit at the table, contribute to the discussion, even be complimented for her appearance or her talents. But when the meeting ends, when the day closes, when everyone else goes home to someone, she returns to silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that nourishes or comforts, but the kind that screams, the kind that reminds her of everything she doesn't have and maybe never will. You see, the world has normalized this loneliness. We scroll past curated smiles on social media, convinced that everyone else belongs somewhere, everyone else has their people, everyone else is living inside the warmth of community while she shivers just outside the door. And here's the worst part, she starts to believe it's her fault. Maybe she's not interesting enough, not fun enough, not useful enough. Maybe if she tried harder, talked more, smiled bigger, worked longer, maybe then someone would stay, but they never do. And that thought, it settles in her bones like winter. It turns the mirror into a judge. She looks at herself not with curiosity or compassion, but with suspicion. What's wrong with me? Why am I so easy to leave? This is not self-pity. No, this is a raw, lived reality. It is the hollow feeling that comes when no one checks in, when birthdays pass quietly, when emergencies are handled alone, when the deepest thoughts of her soul never get spoken aloud because there's no one safe enough or present enough to hear them. It's not that she wants dozens of friends. She would be grateful for just one. Just one person who remembers her favorite song, one person who sees when she starts to fade, one person who doesn't need a reason to call except that they care. There's a kind of strength people assign to women like this. They call her independent, self-sufficient, resilient, and yes, maybe she is. But don't confuse survival for satisfaction. Don't mistake her ability to keep going as proof she's thriving. A woman can know how to hold her life together and still be crumbling inside. She can take care of everyone else's needs and have no one who thinks to ask about hers. She can walk into a room filled with light and still feel like she's in the dark. There's a lie many women carry, that needing someone is weakness, that asking for connection makes you needy or dramatic or less than, so they keep quiet, they shrink their longing into silence, they convince themselves that this is what life is, that being alone is safer than being disappointed. That loneliness is better than rejection, but inside the ache never leaves. It just gets buried under productivity and politeness. It gets masked with busy schedules and shallow conversations, but late at night it resurfaces. And when it does, it doesn't whisper, it shouts. Sometimes the loneliness doesn't look like sadness. It looks like tired eyes, a sudden pause in the middle of a sentence, a hesitation before sending a text that may never be answered. Sometimes it looks like overworking, overthinking, overgiving. It shows up in perfectionism, in over-apologizing, in trying to earn a place in people's lives by becoming what they want instead of being who she is. That's the weight of it, the constant gnawing pressure to prove that she's worth loving. And it's not just emotional, it's spiritual. The enemy of her soul uses isolation like a weapon, whispering lies into the empty spaces, telling her she's forgotten, that even God has turned his face away, that she is alone and will always be, and if she listens long enough, she may start to believe it. That's why the weight of loneliness is so heavy. It doesn't just attack her circumstances, it goes after her identity. It tries to convince her that she is not just in loneliness, but that she is loneliness, and perhaps most people wouldn't notice. She's mastered the art of appearing fine. She shows up, she smiles, she says, I'm okay, and no one questions it. No one sees through the surface, because it's easier not to look too deeply, easier to believe that the woman who holds everything together doesn't need anything, but God sees. He always sees the tears behind the closed door, the prayers that are too broken to finish, the breathless moments when she's too exhausted to pretend. The truth is, no one was made to carry this kind of weight alone. Loneliness, unaddressed, starts to shape how a woman sees herself, how she sees the world, and even how she sees God. It colors her faith, her confidence, her sense of belonging, and slowly, subtly, it chips away at the hope that anything could be different. But even in that place, especially in that place, something sacred can begin. Because when every false comfort falls away, when every shallow friendship fades, she is left with nothing but the raw space where something real can begin. A place where pride is broken, where need becomes holy, where the voice of truth can finally be heard, not the world's voice, not her own inner critic, but the voice of the one who knows her by name. Do you want me to continue with the next keynote? She doesn't wear armor, but she walks into battle every day. Not the kind you see in movies, not loud or dramatic, but the kind that creeps in quietly, the kind that lives in the mind, in the heart, in the silence between moments. These are the battles no one sees. The ones that don't leave visible scars but still manage to wound deeply. She could be standing next to you, smiling, laughing even, and all the while she's fighting to hold herself together, because being a woman with no friends doesn't just mean being alone. It means facing every fear, every lie, every storm, without anyone to remind her she's not crazy for feeling the way she does. You see her at work, at church, in the grocery store, and everything looks fine. She's presentable, capable, even kind, but what you don't see is the moment before she stepped out the door, when she sat at the edge of her bed and had to convince herself she was strong enough to face another day of invisibility. You don't see the war that rages when she checks her phone and finds it silent yet again. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. Just the quiet confirmation that she is living life uninvited, unnoticed, and unmissed. It's not that she doesn't try. She reaches out sometimes. She initiates conversation. She offers help. She gives. But slowly, over time, the one-sided effort begins to wear thin, because no one wants to feel like a burden. No one wants to chase after people who don't notice when they stop showing up. So she stops texting first, stops making plans, stops pretending she doesn't care. But of course she cares. Of course she wants someone to say, "Where have you been?" Of course she wants someone to fight for her. But they don't, and so the battle turns inward. She begins to question her worth, not in loud, obvious ways, but in quiet assumptions that begin to take root. Maybe she's too much or not enough. Maybe she says the wrong things, wears the wrong clothes, brings the wrong energy into a room. The thoughts don't come all at once. They slip in slowly through the cracks, and before she knows it, they've built a home inside her. She's fighting the battle of perception, trying to see herself clearly when all the mirrors around her seem cracked or missing. Then there's the battle of trust. When you've gone too long without safe people, you start to believe that maybe they don't exist, that maybe everyone is temporary, that every conversation has an expiration date. And so when someone new comes along, kind and warm and seemingly open, a war begins inside her, one side hoping this could finally be it, the other side bracing for the fall. She wants to trust, she wants to open up. But every past betrayal, every cold shoulder, every unexplained silence rises up like ghosts, warning her not to risk it again. She's been left mid-story too many times, so now she tells herself it's safer not to start. And there's the battle of memory, the moments she replays late at night, the ones where she laughed too loud, shared too much, stayed too long, the ones she now regrets, wondering if that was the moment she pushed someone away without realizing it. It becomes obsessive almost, turning over each detail, analyzing every look, every word, every silence. It's exhausting, and yet it feels necessary, because if she can find the moment where it all went wrong, maybe she can fix it next time. Maybe she can avoid being left again, but the most painful battle is the one with hope, that fragile thread she keeps trying to hold on to, hope that maybe next week will be different. Hope that maybe she'll walk into a room and someone will genuinely want to know her, not just her story or her talents, but her. Hope that someday she'll find a friend who doesn't need her to perform, impress, or earn their attention. Just someone who stays, but hope is risky. Hope hurts, because when it's not met, it breaks something inside her all over again, and yet she keeps hoping. That's the fight. That's the brave, brutal choice she makes every day to not let her loneliness turn her heart to stone. This woman fights so many battles with no one to debrief with, no one to say, "That must have been hard," or "You're not crazy for feeling this way." So she carries it all, every doubt, every question, every weight. She carries it into the grocery store, into her job, into her church, and no one sees it because she's learned how to hide it well. She's had to. Vulnerability, when not met with care, becomes a danger. So now she saves it for the moments no one is watching. She doesn't want to be strong all the time. She wants to be known. She wants to be seen and chosen and loved, without conditions, without having to explain herself. But for now, that remains a hope more than a reality, so she continues the fight. She holds her own hand in the dark. She whispers truth to herself when the lies get too loud. She clings to her faith like a lifeline, because sometimes it's the only voice she has left to believe in. There are days when she wins, days when she feels okay, days when she enjoys her own company and even sees the beauty in solitude. But then there are the other days, the days when the weight of being unseen presses down too hard, when even her own reflection feels like a stranger, when she aches not just for friendship, but for a witness to her life, her heart, her presence, because even the strongest soul begins to fray when it's never reflected in someone else's eyes. These battles she fights every day, they're not glamorous, they don't make headlines, but they are real, they are raw, and they demand a courage few understand. She is not weak, she is not broken. She is surviving 1,000 silent wars, and most days no one even notices. But that doesn't make them less real. That doesn't make her less brave. She walks into the fire without fanfare. She keeps living, keeps showing up, keeps hoping, even when no one sees, even when no one claps. Even when her hands are trembling, she fights, and that alone makes her remarkable. Pain has a way of stripping us bare. It removes the layers we build over time, our pride, our plans, our polished answers, and leaves us with nothing but the raw truth of who we are when everything else is gone. And for the woman with no friends, that pain runs deep. It's not just loneliness. It's the quiet grief of being unchosen, the sorrow of being forgotten in a world that never stops spinning. But there is something sacred in that pain. Something dignified, because when pain is carried with honesty, with courage, with faith, it becomes more than suffering. It becomes holy ground. You see, we live in a world that tells women to hide their pain. Cover it up, push through, smile and keep moving, be strong, be independent, don't make people uncomfortable, don't be the emotional one. And so, many women learn to wear a mask of strength that hides the storm beneath it. They walk into rooms with their heads held high while their hearts are breaking quietly inside. They keep showing up, keep giving, keep loving, even when no one notices how heavy it all is. And that right there, that silent endurance, that's not weakness. That's dignity. There is a strange kind of honor in being able to sit with your pain and not let it define you, to carry sorrow in your bones and still speak kindness with your mouth, to cry in secret but serve in public. Not because you're trying to earn applause, but because you know that life still has value even when it hurts. That's the kind of strength people don't write songs about, but it's the kind that changes everything. It's the kind of strength born in fire. Pain becomes dignified when it doesn't make you bitter, when it doesn't twist your heart or harden your compassion. Some women go through isolation and come out cold, closed off, numb, and no one can blame them for it. But there are others who go through the same silence, the same rejection, the same long nights of crying on the kitchen floor, and still choose to stay soft, still choose to love, still choose to believe that people are worth the risk, that God is still near, that their heart, even broken, is not useless. That's not just surviving, that's sacred. A woman who has suffered and still hopes is a woman who's tasted truth deeper than comfort. She's not naive. She knows exactly how hard this world can be, but she also knows there is something stronger than sorrow. She knows that pain can either consume her or purify her, and she chooses the latter. She lets it teach her, not about her inadequacy, but about her capacity to love without return, to endure without recognition, to grow in places no one thought anything could grow. That kind of resilience doesn't come from personality or temperament. It comes from the furnace. It comes from walking through the valley and learning that grace is not a feeling, it's a force. There is dignity in the woman who has suffered rejection and still walks into the room with her head high. Not because she thinks she's better than anyone else, but because she refuses to let her worth be determined by someone else's absence. She has learned to separate her value from her visibility. She may not be surrounded by friends, but she is not empty. She may not have a crowd, but she is not without purpose. She's not defined by who leaves, she's anchored by what remains. And what remains is the quiet, unshakable truth that even in pain, she is still whole. That's the thing about real pain. It exposes false foundations. It shows you what can't hold you. When you have no one to run to, no one to vent to, no one to lean on, you're left with nothing but the silence and the savior. And in that silence, things become clear. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop depending on applause or affirmation to feel real. And somehow, through the ache, you find yourself becoming someone deeper, someone truer, someone more compassionate. That's the gift of pain, not the kind you ask for, but the kind that teaches you what you couldn't learn any other way. Because a woman who has suffered deeply becomes the kind of woman who sees deeply. She notices pain in others that most people miss. She becomes the one who doesn't turn away when someone else breaks. She becomes a safe place, not because she has all the answers, but because she understands what it feels like to be without them. Her pain has given her eyes, not just to see suffering, but to stand in it with someone else and say, "You're not alone." There is no shame in pain. The shame comes when the world tells her that her suffering is proof of failure. But what if it's the opposite? What if it's proof of formation? What if every lonely night, every unanswered message, every room she walked into and didn't belong? What if all of it is shaping her into someone who is not just strong but steady? Someone who can hold the weight of other people's hearts because she's learned how to hold her own. She doesn't need to be rescued. She doesn't need pity. She doesn't even need everyone to understand. She just needs the freedom to stand in her pain without apology, to grieve without explanation, to feel deeply without fear of being labeled dramatic or needy, because her pain is not a flaw, it's not a failure. It's a sign that she's still alive, still fighting, still open to love even after everything. There is dignity in pain when it doesn't make you hide from who you are, when it brings you closer to truth instead of running from it. When it strips away the illusions and leaves you with something real, something eternal, the kind of truth that says, even here you are seen, even now you are loved, even broken, you are valuable. That's not just survival. That's sacred survival, that's dignity, that's what happens when pain is not wasted, but woven into the story of someone becoming exactly who they were meant to be. There comes a point when the weight of loneliness is no longer just something to carry, it becomes something to answer. A moment where the silence stops being a void and starts sounding like a call. Not a call to pretend everything is fine, not a call to get over it or toughen up, but a call to rise. To get up, not with everything fixed, not with the pain erased, but with the quiet defiance of someone who refuses to stay down. And for the woman with no friends, this call doesn't come through applause or invitation. It comes in the middle of the night, it comes in the middle of tears, it comes when she realizes that no one is coming to save her, and somehow that becomes the beginning of her strength, because rising doesn't mean everything gets easier. It means she gets stronger. It means she chooses to breathe deeply even when her chest feels heavy. It means she walks into spaces where she once felt invisible and dares to speak like her words matter. It means she begins to believe that her story is not over just because it's been quiet, that her voice is not irrelevant just because no one has asked her opinion in a long time, that her presence still shifts the atmosphere even if no one says so. This kind of rising isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with spotlights or celebration. Sometimes it looks like brushing her hair and going to the store even though her heart is tired. Sometimes it's replying to a message when everything in her wants to disappear. Sometimes it's standing in church with tears in her eyes, lifting her hands not because she feels strong, but because she's clinging to something greater than her strength. Sometimes rising is simply deciding that today she will not be swallowed by the ache. The world often paints rising as a comeback story, loud, flashy, undeniable, but for her it's more subtle, more sacred. It's in the way she slowly stops apologizing for existing, in the way she begins to speak her truth without softening it to make others comfortable, in the way she stops waiting for someone else to give her permission to show up fully as herself. Rising is not about waiting to be noticed, it's about noticing herself, noticing the dreams that still live inside her, the wisdom she's gathered in silence, the strength that has grown from sorrow. She starts to see that maybe loneliness wasn't the end, maybe it was preparation, maybe the isolation that made her feel forgotten was actually the soil where something unshakable was being planted. Because now, when she speaks, her words carry depth. Now, when she shows up, she brings her whole self, not just the parts that are polished and presentable. She has nothing left to prove, and in that freedom, she begins to live more honestly than she ever has. Rising is not about pretending the pain never existed. It's about letting the pain shape her without letting it define her. It's about realizing that she still has something to give, even if no one has asked for it yet. That her story matters, even if it hasn't been celebrated. That her gifts are still valuable, even if they've been overlooked. She starts to understand that being unseen does not mean being unworthy. And from that revelation comes a quiet kind of power. This is not the rise of rebellion. It's not a loud declaration against the people who left or the friendships that faded. It's a rise rooted in dignity, in choosing to live a meaningful life, even if no one is clapping, in choosing to cultivate joy, even in solitude, in refusing to become bitter, even when it would be easier. It's about reclaiming the parts of herself she once abandoned to try and fit in, her laughter, her creativity, her sensitivity, her voice. She begins to take herself seriously, not in a prideful way, but in a way that says, I matter, even when no one sees it. I matter because I'm made in the image of God. I matter because I'm still here. And slowly, that belief becomes a fire. It doesn't roar at first, it flickers. It grows in the quiet moments, in the discipline of choosing love over fear, in the decision to show up, to reach out, to believe that her life is worth living fully, even without an audience. This rising shifts how she sees herself. She's no longer just a woman waiting for friendship. She's a woman becoming whole, and from that wholeness, new things begin to form, not instantly, not perfectly, but beautifully. Maybe she starts creating again, writing, singing, building. Maybe she begins to pour into someone else who feels forgotten. Maybe she starts setting boundaries with people who only stayed when she was small. Maybe she lets go of the shame that came with being alone and starts walking with her head high, not because everything is fixed, but because she's finally found her footing. It's not easy, rising rarely is. It's a daily decision, a daily fight, a daily whisper to herself that she is still becoming, that God is still working, that loneliness doesn't get the final word, and in that whisper there is a power stronger than isolation, a courage deeper than despair, a faith that holds her up when nothing else can. She rises not to impress, not to prove, but because her heart demands it, because something in her refuses to let the story end here. Because somewhere, deep down, she knows she was made for more than survival. She was made for wholeness, for beauty, for purpose, and even if no one else sees it yet, she will live like it's true, because it is. And the day will come, maybe quietly, maybe unexpectedly, when her rising becomes a light to someone else, when another woman, sitting in her own silence, sees her and realizes she's not alone. That's how healing begins. That's how community forms. That's how the world changes, not through noise, but through the quiet courage of women who choose to rise anyway. There is a kind of friendship that goes deeper than shared interests, deeper than matching schedules, deeper than surface level conversations. It's not built in loud rooms or fast moments. It doesn't rush. It doesn't sparkle on the outside. It's quiet. It's sacred. It's rare. And for the woman with no friends, the ache of her loneliness is often a reflection of her longing for this kind of friendship. Not just company, not just people to sit next to, but someone who sees her soul and chooses to stay. Someone who doesn't flinch at her mess, someone who knows her and loves her anyway. She's been surrounded before, she's laughed in groups, she's worn the mask of belonging, she's had people she called friends, but deep down she still felt alone. Because the truth is, presence without connection can feel more isolating than solitude. And now, after all the disappointments, all the quiet goodbyes, all the unexplained distance, she's not just looking for friends. She's looking for depth, for real, for safe, this deeper friendship she longs for. It's not flashy. It doesn't need to be loud or constant. It needs to be true. It needs to be rooted in something stronger than convenience. It's the kind of friendship where silence isn't awkward, where the pauses in conversation aren't filled with fear, but with peace. It's the kind where you don't have to explain why you've been quiet lately. They already understand. They already know how life can stretch you thin. And they are still there, not keeping score, not demanding performance, just there. But before she can find a friendship like that, something has to happen inside of her. She has to stop shrinking to fit other people's comfort. She has to stop saying yes when she means no, just to keep someone from walking away. She has to stop chasing people who don't care to know her. Because a deeper friendship doesn't come when we're trying to be what someone else wants. It comes when we're finally honest about who we really are. When we stop editing ourselves to be liked and instead start showing up whole. That honesty, it's terrifying, especially for someone who's been hurt before. It's hard to open up when your story has been mishandled, when your vulnerability has been met with silence or worse, betrayal, and yet that's the only way the deeper friendship forms. It starts in those brave moments when someone risks a little piece of truth and the other person holds it gently. No fixing, no judgment, just presence. She's not looking for someone to rescue her. She's not looking for constant attention. She's looking for someone who gets it. Someone who understands what it's like to have walked through fire and come out a little scarred, but still soft. Someone who knows how to sit in the dark and not try to flip on all the lights. Someone who has been lonely too, not just for people, but for connection, for substance, for truth. And if she ever finds a friendship like that, she'll recognize it, not by how it feels in the moment, but by what it builds over time, because real friendship builds trust. It doesn't demand it overnight. It's not rushed. It grows slowly like roots underground, and that kind of growth doesn't always feel exciting, but it's the kind that lasts, the kind that can hold weight, the kind that survives the seasons, the silence, the misunderstandings. The kind that doesn't walk away just because things aren't easy. She's learning to hold out for that, to stop settling for proximity when what she needs is presence, to stop filling her time with people who only take, to stop fearing the loneliness so much that she chooses connections that drain her. She's learning that being alone can be better than being half known, that waiting can be wiser than clinging, that the ache for a deeper friendship is not a weakness, it's a sign of her depth, of her capacity to love, of the kind of friend she's ready to be. Because before she finds that deeper friendship, she becomes it. She becomes the kind of person who listens more than she speaks, who asks real questions, who remembers details, who shows up even when it's inconvenient. She becomes the friend she's been searching for, not perfectly, not without struggle, but intentionally, and in doing so, she begins to draw others like her. Others who are tired of shallow conversations and performance-based connections, others who are hungry for authenticity, and from that hunger, something new begins. It doesn't always look the way she imagined. It might be slower, it might come through unexpected people, it might form in the ordinary, over coffee, during long walks, through shared tears, but when it comes, she'll know, because it won't feel like striving. It won't feel like she has to keep proving her worth. It'll feel like rest, like exhale, like home. This deeper friendship doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make life suddenly easy, but it gives her a place to land. A place to be human, a place to be seen, and that changes everything. Because once you've been seen like that, it's hard to go back to pretending. Once you've been loved without performance, it becomes easier to let go of the masks. And that freedom, it's healing, not just for her, but for the ones who get to walk beside her. She still has to walk through the lonely seasons, still has to face the quiet, still has to live in the tension of hope and waiting. But now she knows what she's waiting for, not for popularity, not for constant company, but for depth, for honesty, for the kind of friendship that feels like soil, not flashy, not fast, but fertile, the kind that allows both people to grow. This is what she holds out for. This is what she prepares her heart to receive. This is what she's learning to give. And maybe, just maybe, that hunger for something deeper, that ache that has followed her for so long, is not just a burden to carry, but a map pointing her toward what's real, toward something worth waiting for, toward the friendship her soul was made to hold.